Thank you to everyone who has joined this morning or afternoon if you are based in Europe. We're going to get started in just a moment here. We are just getting all of our panelists into the session, so just bear with us for just a moment and we will get started. Okay. I think we should be ready to go. So I want to thank everyone for joining this morning. We're excited to welcome you to Encouraging Transparency in Dynamic Supply Chains, Practical Guidance for Regulatory Compliance. Thank you so much for spending your morning or afternoon with us today. I'll introduce our exciting panelists in just a moment. But first, I just wanted to open by saying, if you have any questions throughout the course of this webinar, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Right at the bottom, you should see a little button that says Q&A. You can ask questions anonymously or with your name attached. And if we have time towards the end of the session, I will get to those questions. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. So let's get started. First, I am joined by Mera Lanutti, the Sourcing Sustainability Director for JTI. Welcome, Mera. We're really excited to have you today. I am also joined by Forrest Fu, Vice President and Associate General Counsel for Merchandising, Supply Chain, and Brand Protection for Lowe's. I am finally joined by Lisa Travnik, Chief Revenue Officer for Sourcemap. And my name is Marissa Brock. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Government Affairs for Sourcemap. So thank you to my wonderful panelists joining from around the world this morning. So we're going to dive right in. I want to give Mera and Forrest just a quick moment to introduce themselves. Just 2 quick minutes, just to introduce, what your roles are at your respective organizations, just to give our audience a little bit more of background of what you do, and then we'll dive right into the session. So, Mera, if you wouldn't mind just going first, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Marissa. With pleasure. My name is Mera Lanutti. I drive the sustainability for electronic business of JTI International. I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland, and we've been collaborating with Sourcemap for nearly 2 years now. So thank you for the invite. Very exciting to share our experience with you, and happy to be together with Forrest in this panel, learning from you too as well. Thanks.
Excellent. And Forrest, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Forrest Fu, VP at Lowe's in the legal department. So my day job is to support end-to-end customer experience for products from the initial production all the way to have the products on the shelf or on Lowe's.com, offering them to the customers. So several years ago, people may remember UFLPA. So when that came up, I was tasked to support to find a way to comply with that. At the same time, that's the time I started to engage with Sourcemap and bring them to Lowe's. So today's my role has been slightly changed, more on the commercial side instead of on the compliance side. But I'm happy to continue to spend the time with Sourcemap and everyone else. Thank you.
Excellent. So look, we're going to dive right into our questions, and I just want to open this up by sort of setting the stage for, why we came together here today. We want to talk really about some of these best practices around supply chain transparency. I know that this is not a new topic. There are quite a few webinars, panels, conferences about supply chain transparency. This is certainly not a new topic. Supply chain mapping and supply chain transparency is something that has now been a requirement for several years now. And this has become a precedent at a lot of companies. And actually, that's why we wanted to have this session today, because certain industries, were ahead of the game before others because they had, many years of experience gaining this level of visibility into their supply chain. And now that this is really a standard and a requirement across really all industries, there are particular challenges that more dynamic and frequently changing industries have to face that others have not. So there are those particular challenges that we want to talk about. We want to talk about some of those best practices for encouraging this level of data collection from suppliers, encouraging this level of trust from suppliers, because that really is sort of the foundation for getting this level of visibility, ensuring that your suppliers understand, where you're or why you're asking for this information. So that's really why we came together today, and we want to get this diverse set of perspectives from our panelists. So we want to dive in first by talking about sort of the business case for transparency. How do we make this case within our respective executive teams and within our businesses? That can be a pretty unique challenge because this isn't always the same level of priority within each department. So, Forrest, I want to start here with you. Really for any supply chain mapping project to be successful, it requires internal stakeholders to gain that exec level buy-in. Not just to get, of course, the funding to get a project off the ground, but to get the support for the project to meet its objectives. So, can you speak a little bit about how you were able to work within Lowe's to gain that interdepartmental buy-in, and what were some of those challenges that you had to overcome?
Sure. Happy to talk about that. So I think that's so I want to talk about the internal engagement first and then talk about the potential challenges. Okay. So the internal engagement, I think there are three things I want to share. So first is, so I'm in the legal team, right? So think about that. So what's your reputation within the organization? So when people hear attorneys, their initial response was like, I'm too wrong. Or I want to talk with that attorney to understand why he or she brings some issues to me, right? Think about how you build your reputation so that when you go to them, talk about supply chain mapping, people will decide whether they want to listen to you or they think that this is legal trying to bring a nonsense to me again. So I think that's so the very first part for the internal engagement is don't think that you only engage them when this issue comes up. This is a very long-term relationship you have to build. The trust you have with the clients will help you to kick off the conversation. So once you kick off the conversation, then you need to talk about that, why we are doing this. So when people heard UFLPA or when people heard about supply chain mapping, their initial response could be, this is a cost for us, right? I need to spend the money. I need to find the resources, stuff for this. So at Lowe's, as a retailer, so our sales is very important, right? But at the same time, operational cost is also critical. So my job is to educate people. The reason we are trying to have a mapping exercise is not saying that we are trying to add cost to us, but trying to avoid or mitigate the cost when a detention happens. Because detention could happen at any time for whatever reasons, right? UFLPA happened to be, the forced labor has happened to be one of the major driver in the past few years for detention. So when that happens, if you want to have the containers go through the custom, you will want to have a very clear and a comprehensive supply chain mapping to show the CBP. That is how you try to save the cost. Otherwise, you have to either ship the product back to the country of origin, or you may have to leave those containers in the United States, incurring demurrage costs and others while you are trying to work through the custom to get those containers go through, right? So this is a cost saving, not a cost added to our operation. I, I think the last thing is to share with the internal business clients that this is not a legal project, right? This is collectively supply chain, global sourcing, responsible sourcing teams. All of us are getting together because we as a company want to build a ethical reputation within the community. So it is not Forest want to do the supply chain mapping. If you get business clients saying that, hey, we should do supply chain mapping, you are 50% already get to the success that you want to achieve. Does that make sense? So these are 3 points I want to talk about with respect to internal engagement.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. Mira, I'd love to pose the same question for you and hear a little bit about how you were able to get that interdepartmental buy-in at your business and any best practices that you can share as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. It all starts with the why, with the purpose, and I relate to what Forrest says. I mean, the external driver is clear. We as a company, given the background of the industry and the company, we very, very alert to reputational risk and are very mindful of the way we conduct the business. And in terms of challenges obtaining the buy-in with the management, I wouldn't say that was an issue for us specifically because as a company, we have a very long commitment to responsible sourcing and very robust and mature responsible sourcing program in our agricultural supply chain with very good traceability down to origin location. So it wasn't difficult to sell the business case to our management. What was challenging was more related to the fact that from a very simple agricultural supply chain, we enter into electronics, which is a very opaque, very multi-tiered, very dynamic supply chain with many players. And we simply did not know how this is going to go. It was a first-time experience for us. We did not know how our suppliers will respond because we can only map our supply chain as long as our suppliers support the exercise. So I think the other thing that played in our case is I think it's easier for larger companies to use their size, their leverage, the power of the brand name, which for us isn't exactly the case in electronics. So all of these questions were things that I think amalgamated in. Are we ready for that challenge? But I think, yeah, we thought it was a good thing to start doing. So here we are.
Do you mind? I'm familiar with both of your use cases and how you all evolved your projects kind of from the very beginning of the conversation. So for both of you, kind of a two-sided question. One, Mira, if you can talk a little bit more about, because you moved a little quickly, like it was difficult, but then we decided it was good. So there's, types of conversations, stakeholders in that. I know you went through some gymnastics internally to make that happen. So if you could share a little bit about what you learned. And then for both of you, we discussed here a minute ago the executive buy-in, but I know for a lot of folks on this call that I know personally, and also something we talk to prospects about every day is the non-executive buy-in as well. Those who own the supplier relationships, some category managers. There's always some regional, different levels of buy-in in different regions or in different departments. So anything to call out there or things to think about, either for those who are a little bit closer to where you are now. So those who are building the case but need to get over the hump, or maybe even for those who are at the very, very beginning, they're in compliance, they're in the customs team, they know that this needs to happen and they need to start building out a plan to kind of knock this out, especially with the supply chains that you both cover. So Mera, maybe I'll start with you on the first part of the question.
Yeah, of course, with pleasure. So, in our case, in terms of preparation, it is true that it wasn't an easy start simply because it was a first time exercise. We did not know what to expect. We did not know how to hold ourselves in our relationship with the suppliers, explaining something so demanding of ourselves and of them. And so, before we launched, of course, we collaborated with Sourcemap team. We tailored the system in a way that serves our purpose. And also we did a lot of preparatory work with our teams and in our suppliers. With our teams, we did a lot of prepping work to explain really well what is the why, the what and the how of supply chain mapping. What does it consist of? What is expected of other teams within our sourcing function? And also we tried really to convey to them the message that it's not just a compliance exercise, although the compliance argument is always very helpful in all stakeholder conversations, but really it was also a type of conversation that enable our teams to understand that yes, it supports our commitment to human rights, our commitment to responsible sourcing, but also historically we never had a deep look into our supply chain. So we typically know very well who are the manufacturers of our components, but we never had the opportunity to go so deep as to know where are the locations where the components are produced. And so the other part of the preparatory work we did was a really good work with our suppliers. And needless to say, there is always a lot of suppliers resistance. So we had to work and help suppliers understand that this is not just some sort of uncanny business intelligence. There is a serious business reason for us to do it. There is a value added for us, but there is also a value added for suppliers as well, because they are regulatory compliance matters that are valid for us, but valid for our suppliers as well. We also worked a lot around ensuring everyone that confidentiality is, first of all, taken seriously. And then we are not really requiring data that is proprietary information. And so, yes, it was really an exercise of helping our suppliers understand and ourselves understand who and where our suppliers are in our supply chain. And I'm not talking just about the tier 1 or tier 2, because this we know pretty well. Where we were curious and not aware of was very way deeper into our supply chain. And the purpose of that was, I mean, Forrest is correct, UFLPA. For us in Europe, we see quite a number of regulatory developments that expect of companies to have a visibility in the supply chain, forced labor as well. And this is particularly important again in electronics, because forced labor is really inherent to electronic supply chains. So yes, it was a lot of change management at the beginning, alongside planning a very ambitious project. And it was a challenging start, but I think it evolved over the months.
All right. So, Lisa, I think that this is a great question, because for executives, it's easier to actually sell this idea to them. But for people who are, deep in this, right, especially non-executives, a lot of time that they will ask, what is this for them, right? How this going to be benefit them? So add another layer of complexity. So some companies using the supply chain mapping to not only address forced labor concerns, but also do other things like control of order diversification, looking for where the raw materials comes from to build a business case. Some companies choose to be taking a more conservative approach and saying that, hey, the data we're going to collect is going to stay within a very small group that won't be used for anything other than for forced labor. So at Lowe's, we take the latter approach. So that's created another complexity, challenging for the non-executives because they were like, you want me to do the work, but I'm not getting anything, right? It feels like that for the Halloween trick or treat. You tell the kids that go do the trick or treat, but dad and mom are going to take all the candies, right? So the same kind of concept. Um, so the way how we are trying to do that is eventually trying to show people that back to the point that talking about internal engagements, this is not just legal's project. So it is easy for legal just say, this is an issue, go and do it. Or I can go to them and say, this is an issue. Legal is going to be pulling resource into this. We're going to take the lead for this. However, we need your help, right? We need your help to engage a supplier to support this. We need your voice to share that, spread this in the entire organization so people has awareness so that we can gain more rallies from others. I think as non-executives, people who are working on this daily basis, appreciate that you see their value and appreciate that you want to get their opinion and allow them have a seat at the table so that they will collectively work with you, even though they are not necessarily going to have the data other companies may need and use for other purposes, right? And again, also explain to them that the goal, the main purpose is to address forced labor issues. So we as a company, regardless what is your level, regardless what is your role and responsibility, we should sing the same song to our suppliers that we are only using the data for a certain purpose, because that is also, helpful for driving the supply engagement.
That's great. I mean, I think this is actually a perfect segue to the next section that we want to talk about, which is supplier engagement. What are some of the ways in which you help build that trust directly with the suppliers? Forrest, you started to talk about this of making it clear to the suppliers how you're going to use the data that you're collecting from them. But from your perspective, are there any other best practices that you can share? I think particularly because you have this unique perspective working in legal around building that trust directly with suppliers to really maximize their responsiveness.
Sure. I think Mira already covered confidentiality. So let me share two other points that I think are very helpful. The first thing is being very mindful about the different countries' culture, right? So a lot of the data you're collecting is from PAC Asia, right? AKA a lot of this come from China. So the Asian culture, I think that they value a lot of personal trust. I think sometimes the personal trust is so critical. If they don't trust you, they won't even do business with you. Doesn't matter how tempting that sounds like. So you need to really spend the time to explain to suppliers what we are trying to achieve. You really need to, meet with them so that you can explain to them why we are doing this and how we are trying to do this. Being very transparent with them. Mira raised a point that some big companies may have a better leverage for doing that. I agree, but also disagree. So let me tell you why. Lowe's is a big company, but a lot of our suppliers are also public companies. They are critical suppliers in their respective area. They may be dominating the market, or they are so big that I'm not sure I have a lot of leverage on the table to force them to do the supply chain mapping with us. So if you're going to them and say, I'm Lowe's, I want you to do this, they will say, no, thank you, but no, thank you, right? So how to approach them, in a very deliberate and also polite way is to get their trust. I think that's one of the things that I want to point out. The other thing that I want to point out is that for the supply engagements, like I said, because some of the companies are very sophisticated, seeking feedback from them. right? Because none of the tool is perfect. I think when we select Sourcemap, what I was looking for is they have an army of customer service person that can follow up on the inquiries. I don't have that army. They have the language capacity that can speak in the foreign language or in the local language with suppliers. I'm not sure that I'm able to master all the different languages, right? So then other than that, think about what are the other challenges or feedback that suppliers will have for you. Because I do have suppliers come to me and say, hey, the platform has this or that kind of issues. I'm not sure that I'm able to get all my members sign on, provide inputs. I can only give one, which is our main business owner, but the actual detail needs to be provided from someone else. So we bring that feedback back to Sourcemap, and then people come up with a technology solution for that, right? Or they may say that you need to give us more training. You need to explain to us what that means. Talk with our non-executives because you get our executive buy-in, but our non-executives who are actually going to respond to your questionnaire not necessarily know how to interact with the platform, right? So that's another part that's great feedback. So we take that back and we need to do this and partner with Sourcemap, launch more and more webinars for them so that can help them to onboard. Because the easier the process is, the better supply engagement you're going to have. Helpful?
Very, very helpful. Thank you so much, Forrest. I think, again, the unique perspective that you bring from legal is really helpful for our audience because this is a challenge that so many companies face now that there are more and more regulations and even rule of origin tariffs that are requiring companies to collect a pretty massive amount of data from suppliers. Supplier unresponsiveness is a bigger problem now than it was, 10 years ago when companies were primarily collecting this information for, their own purposes, for responsible sourcing and what have you. When the primary objective is compliance, there really is a need to get past that hurdle and, understanding the tools and the tricks and the best practices to ensure that you're building that trust with suppliers, I think is really, really important. Mera, I'd love to hear from you as well. Any best practices that you can share from your perspective around building that trust and maximizing supplier engagement from your side?
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. I do enjoy the question, and a lot of what Forrest said really resonates with me and with the practice we had. We had a different bag of experiences with our suppliers, and one cannot miss the point that Forrest made that particularly we see it in electronics. A lot of our electronic supply chain is from Asia. And then there is this different understanding of what human rights due diligence is and forced labor is. And sometimes companies don't see that as an issue necessarily, or sometimes they are less keen to provide information or support with the due diligence as other counterparties in Occidental part of the world would support. So yes, this is definitely a factor to be considered, the geography, the jurisdictions. We also had the experience of having that collaboration, and it's somewhat easier to work with the suppliers who have already launched traceability themselves, be it because it was a customary requirement or it's because they themselves are subject to some regulations requiring traceability and supply chain mapping. The type of supply chain and where the supplier sits in the supply chain also has a difference. Obviously, it has a lot to do with the number of data points required from suppliers. So one of the piece of advice I have here is, I think when we approach suppliers, alongside making very clear what is it for them in this process, we also need to be very clear of exactly what information we want, what are we going to use it, but really restrict ourselves with the ask, because if we ask too much information that is not going to be necessary, we actually draining resources from our suppliers, and then we diminish the prospects of them responding next time. And also another learning and observation we had is it seems somewhat easier to talk about supply chain mapping and traceability in those supply chains where you follow a particular raw material. So in our case, we've observed that because we have a practice of conflict minerals due diligence and battery minerals due diligence, because it's a known ask of supplier to share that type of data, because it's a very well established industry practice and protocols and tools to support and facilitate the exchange of information, suppliers are, well, I don't know if they are keen, but they know what is expected of them, and they support the traceability. So it's easier to have traceability, and then Sourcemap comes as a very good digital platform to store the data. And again, I cannot stress it enough, the availability of resources both in our company and in the suppliers, that really matters a lot. So if companies start supply chain mapping and traceability, they need to be very mindful about the resources they have. So these are our learning points here.
Great. I think that something that we see with a lot of industries, particularly as this this shift to supply chain transparency as just a must-have is really starting to affect all industries and all markets. Is, some supply chains are significantly more challenging than others in terms of getting that visibility all the way down to, the mine, the farm, that end tier. And I'm curious, Mera, in particular, whether you have experienced that within JTI, whether there have been, particular challenges getting all the way down to the mine or the farm because of the how dynamic the supply chains are, and if that's something that you've had to sort of reckon with as an industry that has a lot of frequent change.
Yeah. That's a really good question, and a very complex one. So what we have in JTI is we do use a combination of tools. Obviously, we adapt the tools to the type of supply chain, and also the prehistory plays a big part. So again, agricultural supply chains is something that as a company, JTI has invested a lot of effort. We know where the leaf comes from. This is merit of my colleagues from another department, but yes, we do know where the materials are coming down to the farm. For the mine of origin, for the most part, we know, and it's a requirement also of multiple regulation around supply chain, conflict minerals, and battery regulation. And like I said, it really plays an important role. Is there are established industry protocols that enable companies to gain visibility further into their upstream supply chain without necessarily antagonizing a relationship with the supplier. So they are mineral templates that are used as a tool. But I think, again, the complexity of the supply chain really matters a lot. And maybe one of the most important learning point was, and a challenge that we were thinking when we were launching the collaboration with you, is what if we don't map anything? What if we don't map completely? And I think part of the challenge, part of the thinking was really reckon with the fact that we will never be able to manage 100% everything, and it will be 100% correct at 100% of the time. So this perfection won't ever materialize itself. So what we learn is that we we need to be comfortable that there will be parts of our supply chain that we probably never gonna gain visibility on. And then that gets to another part of the approach we have is we need to be smart and be able to offset the information that we don't get via supply chain with other means and methods, and most notably, this is supplier engagement. I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, complex tools used to address complex visibility issues.
So I do want to add one more point is that when supply chain mapping initiated years ago, right? So it was not a norm asking for that kind of information. So I'm glad that your Sourcemap it continues to have this kind of webinars to encourage people to be part of the supply chain mapping, because the more companies is asking for the information, the easier for all of us to get the data, because now it becomes the industry practice. It is not even best practice. It's just a part of the doing the business, right? Once people get used to that, then I'm sure that the mapping for Mera could be similar to some other company doing very similar things like Mera's company. So then everyone feels comfortable enough and everyone's familiar with the process enough, and so make everyone's life easier.
I was about to head there for us, so thanks for the tee up, because I know both of you've been doing this for a couple of years. I've known you for a couple of years. I know that there was a lot of work done ahead of that, and I think every time I speak to either of you, you're well connected in your space with your peers, and there's someone else that you've talked to, or I think there's things going on in your mind about where the space is headed. So without putting you too much on the spot. But picking up on what you said, Forrest, how do you feel based on, when you started to now, and then, maybe 2 or 5 years out, like where you think from a comfort level, or how close do you think we will be, in particular, again, with the say metals and mining and some of the spaces we've talked about, to being more like a cocoa, right? Like where it is an industry norm versus a best practice. Like, where do you think we are in the cycle there? And and how do you feel based on who you've talked to and what you know about the space, where how is that progressing?
Yeah, so happy to share my perspective, but I'm also curious about Mira's perspective. I think we're getting better again, but like Mira said, that it's not going to be perfect, right? So we have to live with the fact that you will never be able to achieve 100%. And there are also headwinds, right? A couple of years ago was the China anti-foreign sanction law, right? Now there's a blocking law just came out in April. So there's a lot of headwinds that's when we are doing the supply chain mapping. But I think at the same time, the sensitivity is getting lower, right? Because in the past, when we talk about it's mainly driven by forced labor, but now there's many other reasons people are doing this. People are doing that maybe purely for the thinking about control of origin diversification, right? So that's why I think it's people get you used to that and see there's a business reason you're doing that, right? Depending on the company type, right? Again, Lowe's is taking a more conservative approach, but I do see companies is using that for other reasons. So I think we're getting there. Do I believe that it will get to the point that's 100% or close to 100% in a year or two? I don't think so. I think that it's going to take a while. It's going to take a few years to make people to be more comfortable with that. When I'm having the conversations with our major suppliers, they get it because, like Mira said, that they are already doing their own supply chain mapping because they want to know that as well. So when you have not only the U.S. importers as the main drivers, but you also have the suppliers doing their own part, make things easier for both parties.
Mira, anything to add before I jump in?
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I think we have exactly the same experience, and you know, we often think about how much more value we have from the collaboration with Sourcemap and the whole exercise is we now know a lot more about our supply chain. We also know what we need to spend more effort on. And like I said, I mean, we need to invest a lot more into supplier relationship, build more trust, increase the transparency. Um, and this is not just because of regulatory requirement, but we, have this commitment to business and human rights and responsible sourcing. And all of these regulations and voluntary commitments, they are all based on the premise of risk-based due diligence. So if you don't identify where you have a risk, you're actually not doing a good job. So in that sense, even if we don't map the supply chain 100%, I think knowing that a particular part of our supply chain is still more mysterious is for us an indication where we need to place more efforts. I cannot stress more the power of corrective action, big believer and supporter of that. And indeed, I share the opinion that and the experience that supply chain mapping and traceability is starting to normalize and it's not frowned upon. Companies now understand what's the value of it. They understand that it brings value to them as well. And in our case, it was a huge learning opportunity. I think it brought also educational value to our suppliers. So it was a great opportunity to make an inventory of what we know, how we collect data, how we store data, how we interpret data in the company, and also how we collaborate internally between teams. So that's also unexpected value added for us.
Yeah, no, appreciate that so much. Yeah, we hear more frequently from the large suppliers, so I do think that that's happening as well. And then whether it's country of origin diversification or some other kind of operations use cases across the board, we're seeing more and more of your peers and some of the peers of the folks on the call today interested in a more kind of across cost center project. So definitely seeing that momentum. We're excited to see it. Marissa, I'll hand it back to you. I don't know if there's any questions to cover from the audience before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think we just have time for one quick question before we wrap. But we have a great question from in the Q&A for both of our panelists about supply chain resilience. The question is, how can, in your respective opinions, supply chain mapping enhance supply chain resilience? Is there a business case you want to share? How can we convince non-executives to engage in the supply chain mapping process based on the resilience argument? I know this could be a long answer, so I would ask you to maybe keep your answer relatively short, but is there anything you can quickly respond to this question on the resilience piece, and particularly in engaging the non-executives, because I don't think we had a chance to touch on that piece over the course of this webinar. Mera, I'll start with you.
Start with me. Thank you. That's a very complex question. I don't know if I have the smartest answer to that, but I very often when I speak and I'm asked about resilience, I'm repeating myself probably, but I think we're looking at resilience the wrong way. I think we're talking about resilience as our company resilience, our supply chain resilience. And it's like as if it's a Lego toy. We put it together, we enjoy how beautiful it is, and then put it on a shelf for future use. And actually, resilience to me is the whole relationship with the supplier and encouraging them to cultivate trusting relationship with their supplier. This is for me resilience. So the relationship with the supplier, how they respond right now to engagement with us when the things are quiet is extremely good indicator of how suppliers will be prepared and ready to respond tomorrow when times will be more shaky, when the resilience will be needed. So you don't need the resilience when the times for resilience come. You do resilience every single day by building relationship with your supplier along the supply chain. So this is my answer answer to the resilience. And then the better the relationship with your supplier or your counterparty, the easier life is. So
So for Lowe's, again, because we use the data in a more restrictive way, but I see a lot of global sourcing and a supply chain. So I can see in the future when we have enough data, our business team may come to legal again and say, hey, what if that's what we ask for suppliers permission to open the data for other purposes, right? One of the way is about supply chain resilience. So if PVC is currently under short supply in China, just making things up, what are the other potential ways or countries that's having PVC available supplying other suppliers, right? This is a way that can help people to think about as I'm moving my level 1 and level 2 factories out of China, am I going to have PVC supplier in the country that I'm going to move to, right? And then also think about that, okay, so if I'm seeing a lot of imports coming from Vietnam, do they have the port able to handle that kind of volume? What if that's we are bringing more supply to Vietnam, or should that be in Philippines or Singapore? Just thinking about a alternative country of origin, right? So these are the things that people can use the data for other purposes. Just like today, that when your personal data is collected when you are doing shopping, online shopping, and then you will get an email say, do I have permission for marketing emails and others, right? This is the same way that we have the data, we have the massive data, right? We were very careful, similar to what Mera said, do not ask for information you don't need, right? Don't ask for business confidential information like how much you pay for the upstream suppliers. Don't ask for that. But for the raw data that we have so much, I do see there's a potential that you can use for other reasons. We are not doing that, but it doesn't mean other companies is not doing this or have not think about doing that in the near future.
Excellent. Thank you both for your thoughtful and and brief responses. That was a great response to that question. I know we've come right up to the time here. I wanted to thank all of my wonderful panelists for joining me this morning, and thank you to our audience for sticking around for this fruitful discussion. For folks who have colleagues who weren't able to dial in today, we will be circulating the recording of this webinar. So if you didn't get a chance to, or if you have colleagues who didn't get a chance to join, they will have access to the recording. Thank you, Forrest. Thank you, Mera, and thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate your time. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your day. And we will see you all soon.
Thank you for having us. See you all.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
yeah,
much.
everyone.
thank you. Have a good
Bye.
day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.